Welcome to this installment of the Commonwealth of Learning's Open Educational Week interview series, in which we will discuss an important affordance of open licensing, which is localization of open educational resources, or OER. I am Dr. Jako Olivier, Advisor Higher Education. Joining me today is Professor Lynne Bowker, Canada Research Chair in Translation, Technologies and Society from the Université Laval in Canada. Professor Lynne is a certified translator, and she's recently published Demystifying Translation, Introducing Translation to Non-Translators as an Open Access Publication. Welcome.
Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm really happy to be here for this chat.
So let me start with the first question. The localization of open educational resources typically involves adapting content and specifically also language to be relevant to a specific group of students. In your view, would the use of a standard variety of language be appropriate in such a context?
Of course, having an open educational resource available in the standard variety of a language is better than not having the content available at all for a given language. But it's also a missed opportunity for increasing student engagement. When a student can really see themselves and their community and culture reflected in an OER, such as through the use of their own language variety, as well as examples from their own culture, then they will probably be able to relate to the OER more directly. And this, in turn, I think will increase their willingness to engage with and even retain the material.
Do you have any tips for lecturers or faculty who want to do that? Where do we start to get to know what variety would be appropriate?
Well, I think if you are taking a resource and making it available for your own students, for your own teaching purposes, then you would know quite well, I think, the students that you have in your class or in your institution. But if you're trying to make things available for an audience that is perhaps elsewhere, collaboration, I think, would be a great way of taking that on, because really, even if you have visited or read up on another culture, you might not understand it in the same amount of detail as somebody who really lives there and engages with it on a daily basis. So collaboration is also part of the spirit, I think, of the open movement and open education. So collaborative projects are probably the way to go when you are looking at, kind of trying to make resources available on a wider scale.
I totally agree. I think localization starts with that local engagement.
Mhm.
But let me move on to the next question. What do you find to be the most exciting recent advancement in terms of localization of open educational resources?
Well, one of my own personal research areas is technologies for translators. And even beyond my own personal interest, everyone is talking about AI these days. And one type of AI tool that has potential, I think, for localizing OER is automatic translation.
Mhm.
Although automatic translation is actually a relatively old technology, it dates back to the 1940s and 50s, but the underlying approach to automatic translation has changed a lot. So, in this age of AI, the model is a data-driven one. It uses a technique called machine learning. And essentially, machine learning means that we can give examples to the computer and it can learn from the examples that we provide. So if you design your data set of examples properly, then you can really influence what the AI tool learns. And so previously, in older kind of generations of automatic translation technology, we only used to see options for languages. You could choose to translate from French to Portuguese, for example. But now, with these data-driven approaches, if we can curate or create a data set of a particular language variety, then we could ask the tool to translate from Canadian French to Brazilian Portuguese or in other varieties like that. So we're slowly starting to see these types of options becoming available in the most recent AI-based translation tools. And so I think this opens up exciting possibilities for localizing OER. Mhm.
No, definitely. But I think that also emphasizes the need for bigger and better corpora of language varieties, especially in languages where resources are not, that are plentiful as in some languages. Uh,
Exactly, because we do see a different quality of output from these tools when we are dealing with languages that are well resourced and as compared to languages that have fewer resources available. It's a good point. We have work to do to build up resources in some of the language varieties. Mhm.
no, definitely. To conclude, what would you recommend to Commonwealth universities towards the localization of open educational resources at those universities?
Mhm. Well, as we just discussed, I'm a big fan of technology, including tools like automatic translation, but the tools do have limits. So I would encourage anyone not to simply run a text through one of these tools and then release it as an OER. Um, Localizing a resource is about more than just translating the text. It often requires kind of cultural adaptation, maybe substituting examples with ones that are chosen from a local context, adapting things like images, sometimes colors, date formats, currencies. There could be a lot of different things that really need to be adapted. And for many of them, that really requires a human touch. So, I think the tools are great, but they're not a panacea that we can just unleash and use without any intervention from people. But people using tools is a good, powerful combination. Um, but any kind of translation work or localization work can be a little bit subjective. There's not always just an exact perfect translation. There's often, language is flexible, so we can have choices in how we express things. So again, this to me is another good reason to recommend collaboration. Having a team of people that can bounce ideas off each other and kind of negotiate, the best way of expressing something for the local community, and so bringing different people together, integrating different perspectives, and then if you have time, also doing a sort of pilot test of your first draft of the OER with a small group of students and getting some feedback. It will allow you to be able to refine a little bit the content before you release it to a wider audience. So yeah, so collaborating, people using tools, but not only outsourcing exclusively to tools, and pilot testing are things that have worked for me in the past.
Definitely, I agree. And I think you emphasized the two parts of the localization process, that it's not just a language issue, it's also a content issue. So making sure that the content is relevant. And like you said, I think teams um, can be quite useful in this context, bringing not only the faculty, the content experts together, but also language experts. And that's why we
Yes.
need translators and language experts desperately. And I think the student voice can also come through as part of that mix.
Yes, definitely. I mean, the students are the audience that we are hoping will benefit from the resources. So having that opportunity to pilot test and figure out, like, is this really working for them? Do we need to tweak it or adapt it? Students are full of great ideas. I mean, learning is not a one directional thing, right? Where the sort of teacher is teaching the students. Uh, Teachers can learn a lot from students as well. So definitely having them either as part of the development team or as part of that user testing phase will give us a lot of really good feedback.
Professor Lynne, thank you very much for your valuable contribution in terms of localization of open educational resources today. I really appreciate it.
It was my pleasure. I also appreciate the invitation, and I wish everyone a good week.
I'm Jako Olivier. Thank you very much for joining us.